Don't let the cold take her, whispered the wind through the skeletal branches of the pines, carrying a chill that cut through layers of snow like a knife. The forest was silent except for the crunch of ice under paws, a sound sharper than any alarm, as Ghost, the white K9 German Shepherd, stood immovable, ears pricked and eyes glowing amber against the fading twilight. Each breath he drew created small clouds that mingled with the fog settling low in the valley, wrapping the frozen clearing in an almost mystical hush. A child lay curled beneath a bent tree, her small frame barely visible beneath the frost that clung to her hair and clothing. Her shallow breaths trembled in rhythm with the sway of the bare branches above. Ghost did not bark, did not move closer. He merely shifted his weight, pressing one paw firmly into the snow as if staking a silent claim over the fragile life he had been sent to guard. The scent of pine, wet earth, and cold iron filled the air, and Ghost's nose twitched, recognizing the faint trace of human fear mingled with something else, something familiar yet distant. From the shadowed tree line, the headlights of a lone truck appeared, slicing through the powdery haze, and Isaiah Cole, staff sergeant, stepped carefully out of the vehicle, his dark skin muted under the gray light of dusk, broad shoulders hunched against the biting wind. He had not expected to find anyone out here, let alone a German shepherd standing sentinel with such purpose. His boots sank slightly into the crusted snow, sending small flurries up with each step, the sound mingling with the low wind and distant calls of crows returning to their roosts. Ghost's gaze locked onto Isaiah the instant he appeared, his posture stiff yet alert, tail held low but quivering with barely contained energy. Isaiah took a cautious step forward, reaching into his parka to warm his gloved hands, eyes scanning the clearing for the reason behind the dog's intensity. And then he saw her, the little girl, pale as the snow around her, huddled and still, lips tinged with violet from the cold. His chest tightened, and a low breath escaped as he crouched slightly, hand hovering near his belt. Instinctively aware of the fragility before him, Ghost stepped forward just a fraction, then halted, letting Isaiah take in the scene fully, as though giving permission for the moment. The wind carried the scent of snow and frozen earth, but also something more delicate, the faint warmth of life clinging stubbornly to the child's body, and Ghost, trained and instinctive, had sensed it before Isaiah even saw her. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the only sounds the subtle swish of branches and the shallow rasp of the child's inhalations. Isaiah reached the girl slowly, lowering himself to her level, eyes soft but alert, scanning for injuries, hypothermia, anything that might betray how long she had been outside. Ghost positioned himself between them and the approaching truck, a silent guardian, ears flicking to the shadows, every muscle taut, ready to react not with aggression, but with the fierce intent to protect. Isaiah's hand brushed the girl's shoulder, careful, measured, and the slight shift in her body caused Ghost to growl softly, a deep, rolling warning that seemed to vibrate through the snow itself. Isaiah paused, glancing at the dog, understanding in a silent way the bond that was forming in that frozen clearing, a partnership born of instinct, trust, and the shared urgency to preserve life against the merciless winter. The air was bitter, carrying the faint smell of pine resin and the distant smoke from a cabin chimney miles away, but within this small, icy sanctuary, time seemed to slow. Isaiah whispered gently to the girl, voice warm against the cold. "It's okay. I've got you." And Ghost responded with a subtle nudge of his nose, a reassuring presence that seemed to breathe strength into the tiny form. Every muscle in Ghost's body remained poised, yet his amber eyes softened fractionally as he realized the immediate danger was acknowledged, that the child was no longer entirely alone. The scene was cinematic, twilight fading to night, snowflakes caught in the beams of headlights, the hush of the forest, and the quiet resolve of a dog whose loyalty transcended words. Isaiah unzipped his jacket to cover her further, warmth spilling over her frozen frame, and Ghost shifted to stand slightly closer, ensuring no harm would come between them, his gaze never leaving the shadows beyond the clearing. In that suspended moment, the boundary between human and animal blurred. Two sentient beings, one canine and one marine, stood in silent vigilance, bound by instinct and an unspoken promise that life, no matter how fragile, would not be abandoned tonight. Isaiah moved with the care of a man who had learned that panic could waste the few seconds mercy allowed. He slid one arm beneath the child and felt how light she was, lighter than any 7-year-old should have been, a small bundle of cold breath and soaked fabric trembling against his chest. Ghost stepped close enough that his white fur brushed Isaiah's knee, then turned toward the tree-line again, watching the dark spaces between the pines as though the forest itself owed him an explanation. The truck waited 30 yards away, engine running, headlights spilling pale gold across the snow. Isaiah carried the girl toward it, boots breaking through the crust with a steady rhythm, each step leaving a deep print that filled almost immediately with falling powder. He kept his voice low, not because she could answer, but because silence felt too much like surrender. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Just keep breathing. That is all you have to do." Her eyelids fluttered once. A tiny sound left her throat, not a word, hardly even a cry, but it was enough. Isaiah tightened his hold, as if that fragile noise had become a command. Ghost circled behind them, then darted ahead to the truck, leaping into the open rear door before Isaiah reached it. He stood there on the seat, refusing to lie down, refusing comfort, his nose lifted to the wind. Isaiah laid the child across the back seat and wrapped his marine field jacket around her until only her face showed beneath the olive-green fabric. Ghost lowered himself beside her, pressing his warm body along the length of her legs with a tenderness that looked almost practiced. Isaiah watched for half a breath, struck by the strange discipline of it. This was not a stray acting on fear. This was a trained guardian choosing his post. Isaiah climbed into the driver's seat and reached for his phone. One bar flickered, vanished, returned. He called emergency services, gave the nearest marker he had passed, and told them he was headed toward Pine Harbor Medical Center, 12 miles down the mountain road. The dispatcher's voice was calm, distant, and thin through the static. Isaiah answered every question while steering with one hand and checking the mirror every few seconds. Behind him, Ghost had placed his chin near the girl's shoulder, not touching her face, just close enough to feel each breath. Snow struck the windshield in hard white streaks. The wipers moved like tired metronomes. The road curved through black pine and granite, past mailboxes buried to their posts, past a frozen creek that flashed silver under the moonlight. Isaiah knew this kind of cold. Not from Maine. Not from this road. From another winter, another place, another night when someone had reached for him and he had been 3 seconds too late. His jaw tightened. He pushed the memory down, but memories had a way of rising with the weather. 8 years earlier, he had been Corporal Isaiah Cole, younger, louder, still certain that every promise could be kept if a man was brave enough. He had served beside Nathan Briggs, a Marine with quiet eyes and a habit of feeding every abandoned animal near whatever base they passed through. Nathan used to say that dogs understood duty better than most men because they never asked who deserved saving. They just went. Then came the winter aid mission that never reached its final checkpoint. A storm, a missing convoy, a report with too many blanks. Nathan disappeared in whiteout conditions, and all Isaiah received afterward was a folded flag, a sealed file, and a sentence from command that never felt true. No recoverable evidence. No further inquiry. Years later, when Isaiah left active duty, he carried that sentence inside him like a stone. He told people he was fine. He bought a small house near the Maine coast. He took contract work repairing docks and clearing storm damage. He lived quietly. Then Ghost arrived. The white German Shepherd had been transferred twice, then nearly retired for what the paperwork called heightened sensitivity and refusal to disengage from unknown scent trails. Nobody wanted a K9 that woke at 3 in the morning and stared toward the woods as if listening to a voice under the snow. Isaiah signed the adoption papers because he recognized the look in the dog's eyes. It was the same look he saw in the mirror on bad nights. Not broken, not dangerous, just unfinished. In the back seat, the girl shivered hard enough that the jacket rustled. Ghost lifted his head and let out a low whine. Isaiah glanced back. "I know, boy. We are almost there." The hospital lights appeared at the bottom of the hill, blurred by snow and yellow mist. Isaiah pulled under the emergency entrance, horn tapping once, then twice. Nurses rushed out with a stretcher and heated blankets. Ghost leaped down first and stood between them and the child, body rigid, teeth hidden, but warning clear. Isaiah stepped beside him and placed a hand on his collar. "Stand down, Ghost. They are here to help." The dog trembled, fighting instinct, then stepped back. As the nurses lifted the girl, something slipped from the fold of her sleeve and landed softly on the wet pavement. Isaiah bent down. It was half of a burned photograph, stiff with frost. In the dim ambulance light, he saw a young Marine kneeling beside a white puppy. On the back, written in faded ink, were 5 words that turned the cold inside him deeper than winter. "Tell Cole the snow remembers." Isaiah sat on the edge of the hospital bench, coat still damp from the snow, hands clasped around his knees as he watched nurses move quickly with blankets and equipment. Ghost remained at the door, rigid, ears flicking toward every footstep, eyes alert to the faintest sound. The girl, now wrapped in layers of heated fabric, slept fitfully, her small chest rising and falling with the rhythm of shallow breaths. Isaiah reached into the back pocket of his jacket and retrieved the half-burned photograph, turning it slowly over in his hand, tracing the edges with a gloved finger. The image was fragile, stiffened by frost, but the ink was still legible enough to show a young Marine kneeling beside a white German shepherd. Puppy, both faces bright with the innocence of a moment frozen in time. The words on the back, "Tell Cole the snow remembers," made Isaiah swallow hard. He had not seen Nathan Briggs in years, not since the storm and the convoy that never made it. And yet here, in the icy grip of Maine winter, a link to that past had been handed to him through a small, shivering child and a dog that moved with purpose beyond instinct. Isaiah let the photograph rest on his knee as he watched Ghost lower his head to the floor, pawed lightly at the doorframe, then glanced up at him as if to ask permission. Isaiah nodded silently. They had work to do. Outside, snow continued to fall in thick sheets, the hospital lights painting the falling flakes in silver halos. Isaiah made a note of the girl's vitals, the subtle rise of her shoulders, the faint warmth seeping back into her cheeks under the blankets. Every detail mattered. The hospital staff moved efficiently, but Isaiah's mind was already racing ahead, reconstructing the paths that could have led her here, the significance of the burned photograph, the meaning behind the words. Ghost's eyes followed every movement, never leaving the girl, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to protect, ready to act. Isaiah felt the quiet weight of the dog's presence, a reminder of lessons learned long ago in the field: patience, observation, trust, and instinct. He had relied on Ghost in training exercises and real operations alike. But this felt different. There was a stillness in the dog that commanded not fear but respect, a silent acknowledgement that the next steps would require them to work together. Isaiah stood slowly, careful not to startle the child, and approached the nurse who had been monitoring her condition. He inquired about the girl's estimated time to stabilize, the best course of action to protect her, and any protocols to trace family or guardians. Every answer was measured, clinical, and yet there was a pause when Isaiah mentioned the photograph and the words inscribed. The nurse tilted her head, glanced briefly at the paper in his hand, then returned to her duties without comment, leaving Isaiah to interpret what he could. Ghost moved closer, placing a warm nose against Isaiah's leg, a reminder that the girl's survival, the mystery, and their duty were now shared. Isaiah glanced out the window at the snow-covered parking lot, noting the single set of tire tracks leading up the hill. He thought about the journey they had to take, the questions that had to be answered, and the silent promise that he had always carried with him since Nathan Briggs had gone missing. The child, the photograph, the message, and Ghost's unwavering vigilance formed a line connecting past and present, weaving together threads of loyalty, trust, and the quiet determination of those who had endured winter storms, both literal and figurative. Isaiah allowed himself a slow breath, listening to the muffled sounds of the hospital, the faint hum of the heaters, the soft breathing of the girl, and the subtle shifting of Ghost's paws on the floor. Every sense was attuned. He knew they would have to leave soon, to retrace the steps that had brought the girl here, to discover what hidden truths lay beneath layers of snow, and to confront the unanswered questions that had waited for years. Ghost shifted closer to the child, resting his head lightly on her small shoulder, eyes never leaving the entrance. Isaiah bent down, touched the dog's neck gently, and whispered a quiet promise, acknowledging the partnership that had formed between them in the cold. they would uncover the story together. The snow fell outside in unbroken waves, the moonlight casting pale reflections through the frosted windows. Isaiah sat back, letting the warmth of the hospital and the soft presence of Ghost ground him. There was an understanding between them. Each moment mattered, each breath was a gift, and the path forward would demand patience, courage, and the kind of vigilance that only came from shared purpose. Ghost lifted his head, ears pricked again, and let out a single, low whine, a sound that was neither distress nor complaint, but recognition, a signal that he was ready to follow, ready to lead, and that the girl's fragile safety had found its first guardian. Isaiah picked up the photograph once more, tracing the faded ink as he imagined the journey ahead, and felt the first stirrings of hope that despite the snow, despite the cold, despite the mystery, they might yet reach the truth and see the dawn. The morning light filtered through the frosted windows of the emergency room, casting a pale gold across the tiled floor, illuminating the fine mist of warmth that rose from the heating vents. Isaiah remained seated near the child, watching the rise and fall of her chest, counting each shallow breath with deliberate attention, his gloved hands resting lightly on his knees. Ghost sat close by, tail wrapped around his paws, ears swiveling at every sound, eyes locked on the child, as if he could translate each flicker of movement into meaning. Outside, the snow had begun to melt slightly, dripping from the roof in silver threads, but inside the room, the quiet hum of machines and the distant footsteps of nurses created a rhythm that was both comforting and tense. Isaiah unfolded the photograph again, tracing the faded lines and imagining the moment captured years ago when Nathan Briggs had knelt beside the white puppy, the innocence and determination in both their eyes. He felt a connection not only to the child but also to the missing Marine, a bridge across time and circumstance that Ghost seemed to understand intuitively. A nurse approached, checking the child's vitals and adjusting the warming blankets with careful precision, and Isaiah nodded, acknowledging her instructions without speaking, knowing that every gesture mattered. Ghost shifted slightly, pressing closer to the girl, resting his head lightly on the edge of her blanket, and Isaiah could feel the subtle warmth radiating from the dog's body, a living shield against the lingering cold. Isaiah arose slowly, moving to the window to glance at the snow-laden streets beyond, taking note of the tire tracks, the faint imprint of footprints, and the path that had brought them here. He thought about the clues, the photograph, the words on the back, the girl's lack of identification, and the way Ghost had found her with such certainty. Each element suggested a hidden trail that needed to be followed, a story waiting to be revealed beneath layers of frost and memory. Ghost lifted his head, ears alert, and let out a soft whine, the sound carrying a weight of expectation, of understanding, and Isaiah interpreted it as a signal that the next steps would require both patience and courage. He returned to the child's side, adjusting the blanket so it fully covered her small frame, then touched Ghost lightly on the neck, feeling the taut muscles beneath his white coat, and whispered, "We will find the truth, boy. Step by step." The girl stirred slightly, her fingers curling around the edge of the blanket, and Isaiah felt a glimmer of hope stir within him, a fragile light in the dim room. He looked down at the photograph once more, then at Ghost, recognizing that the dog's vigilance was not just protective instinct but a guiding force, leading them toward a story that had waited for years to be told. Outside, the morning sun caught the edges of the icicles hanging from the roof, making them glimmer like fragile glass, and Isaiah imagined the path ahead, tracing the clues through the forest, uncovering the hidden truths, reconnecting with the missing Marine's legacy. Ghost shifted again, tail brushing Isaiah's leg, eyes bright and steady, and Isaiah understood that together they were more than observer and guardian. They were partners in a mission of discovery, bound by loyalty and the quiet miracles that sometimes revealed themselves when least expected. The child's breathing grew steadier under the warmth, her tiny movements more confident, and Isaiah felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders, tempered by the calm presence of Ghost, whose silent insistence reminded him that every action, every careful observation, could make the difference between revelation and continued mystery. The room remained quiet except for the steady rhythm of the child's heartbeat as monitored by the machine, Ghost's low breathing, and the faint hum of hospital activity beyond the doors. Isaiah sat back, letting the moment stretch, absorbing the details of the scene, the interplay of light and shadow, the warmth that contrasted the snow outside, and the sense of purpose that both he and Ghost shared in this small, contained space. Every glance, every pause, every subtle motion seemed amplified, a reminder that patience and attention were as vital as courage and action. Isaiah adjusted the blanket once more, leaned close to the child, and whispered softly, "You are safe now, and we will uncover everything that led you here." Ghost lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes scanning the room, and Isaiah knew that together, they were ready to take the next step, following the trail left behind in silence, snow, and memory, moving toward the hidden truth that had been waiting patiently through the long winter. By late morning, Pine Harbor had begun to wake beneath a sky the color of dull pewter, the storm loosening its grip but leaving the town buried under nearly 18 inches of snow. Plow trucks groaned along the main road, pushing heavy banks toward the curb, while shopkeepers swept powder from their doorways and pretended not to stare when Isaiah Cole stepped out of the hospital with Ghost at his side. The child was stable for now. That was the word the doctor used. Stable. Not safe. Not healed. Not known. She had no identification, no phone number sewn into her coat, no missing child report that matched her description within 100 miles. The nurse had called her Jane Doe on the chart, and Isaiah hated how cold that sounded, as if a name could be taken from a child just because the world had failed to remember it. Ghost walked close to his left leg, his white coat brushed clean, but still carrying the faint scent of pine, snow, and hospital antiseptic. He did not move like a dog eager for air. He moved like a witness returning to the place where a question had been left unfinished. Isaiah kept the burned photograph folded inside a plastic evidence sleeve the hospital had given him, though no one had officially called it evidence yet. On the front, the young Marine smiled beside the white puppy. On the back, those 5 words sat like a prayer written by a hand that knew it might never write again. Tell Cole the snow remembers. Isaiah crossed the parking lot to his truck and paused when Ghost stopped suddenly, nose lifted, ears sharp. Across the street, beneath the green awning of a small diner called Mabel's Corner, an older woman stood with a coffee pot in one hand, watching them through the frosted glass. She looked away too quickly. Isaiah had spent too many years reading silence to ignore it. He opened the passenger door for Ghost, then changed his mind and crossed the street. The bell above the diner door gave a tired jingle as he entered. Warm air met him, thick with the smell of coffee, maple syrup, bacon grease, and old wood. A few locals sat in booths, their conversations shrinking the moment Ghost stepped inside behind him. The white K9 did not bark. He simply stood beside Isaiah, amber eyes moving slowly from face to face, and somehow that was more powerful than noise. The older woman behind the counter set down the coffee pot. Her name tag read Ruth. Her gray hair was pinned in a loose bun, and her hands had the red, cracked look of someone who had spent a lifetime washing dishes and carrying winter in her bones. Isaiah removed his cap. "Ma'am, I am looking for anyone who might know something about a little girl found near Black Pine Ridge last night." Ruth's mouth tightened. A man in the back booth lowered his eyes to his plate. The grill hissed. The clock above the pie case ticked too loudly. Ruth wiped the counter though it was already clean. "Children wander sometimes," she said. Isaiah held her gaze. Not in a storm like that. Ghost stepped forward 1 pace, then stopped beside a stool near the end of the counter. He sniffed the metal leg, then the floor beneath it, and gave a low, uneasy whine. Ruth saw it. Her hand trembled just enough to make the spoon in a coffee mug tap porcelain. Isaiah lowered his voice. "My dog found her before the cold finished what someone else started." No one answered. The room seemed to fold inward. Ruth leaned closer, her eyes damp now, but guarded by years of fear. "You should let the sheriff handle it." Isaiah glanced toward the window, where a county cruiser rolled slowly past without stopping. "Is the sheriff a man I should trust?" Ruth looked down. That was answer enough. She took a napkin from the dispenser, wrote something in a shaking hand, folded it once, and slid it beneath Isaiah's palm as she refilled a mug he had not asked for. Her voice barely moved. "I did not give you anything." Isaiah did not open the napkin right away. He placed a $10 bill on the counter, then rested his hand briefly over Ruth's. Thank you. Her eyes lifted to Ghost. For a moment, the old fear cracked, and something softer appeared beneath it. That dog, she whispered. I remember him smaller. Isaiah went still. Ghost looked up at her, ears forward, body quiet as falling ash. Ruth turned away before she could say more. Outside, Isaiah unfolded the napkin with his back to the wind. The ink had bled slightly into the paper fibers, but the words were clear. Black Pine Road. Old Tremont Place. Do not bring the sheriff. Ghost pressed his nose to the napkin. His whole body changed. The tremble came first, subtle and deep beneath the fur. Then his ears flattened, not from fear, but from recognition. He turned toward the northern road, toward the dark seam of forest beyond town, and pulled once against his leash. Isaiah felt the past open like a door in his chest. He thought of Nathan Briggs feeding a white puppy scraps from his tray, laughing under a pale winter sun. He thought of sealed reports, missing names, and a sentence that had never sounded true. Then he looked toward the hospital windows, where a nameless child fought her way back breath by breath. All right, boy, Isaiah said softly, opening the truck door. Show me what the snow remembers. Ghost leaped in without hesitation, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. And as Isaiah drove north through the quiet town, every porch, every curtain, every face behind frosted glass seemed to know they were heading towards something buried, something old, something that had waited in the cold for the right man and the right dog to come back. Black Pine Road was not a road so much as a scar through the woods, a narrow ribbon of packed snow winding between fir trees that leaned close enough to scrape the sides of Isaiah's truck. The town disappeared behind them within minutes, swallowed by white hills and dark timber, and soon there was only the engine, the steady sweep of the wipers, and Ghosts. Breathing from the passenger seat. The dog sat upright, not relaxed, not curious, but fixed on something ahead. Every few seconds his nose touched the thin crack of the window, drawing in the cold air as if reading a language Isaiah could not see. The napkin from Ruth lay on the dashboard beside the burned photograph, the two clues trembling gently with each rut in the frozen lane. Isaiah drove slowly, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near Ghost's harness. Snowbanks rose shoulder-high on either side. Pine needles carried silver frost. Far above, a hawk circled once in the gray sky and vanished behind the ridge. After nearly 4 miles, Ghost rose suddenly on all fours, paws braced against the seat, a low sound building in his chest. Isaiah eased off the gas. Ahead, half hidden behind a curtain of bare branches, stood the old Tremont Place. The house looked less abandoned than forgotten. Its roof sagged under the weight of winter, its shutters hung crooked, and its porch leaned forward as if tired of keeping secrets. A rusted mailbox, almost buried in snow, bore no name. Isaiah parked behind a stand of spruce, turned off the engine, and let the silence settle. It was deep enough to hear snow sliding from a branch somewhere in the woods. Ghost did not wait for command. He stepped down, nose to the ground, moving with careful certainty along the edge of the driveway. Isaiah followed, boots sinking into old powder layered over ice. He saw tracks near the porch, half-filled but recent enough to matter. Not a child's, not an animal's. Adult boot prints, moving in and out, measured and deliberate. Isaiah crouched, studying them. Then Ghost gave one sharp whine from the side of the house. Isaiah found him at a cellar door almost sealed shut by snow, his white paws scratching not wildly, but precisely at the lower corner. Isaiah brushed away the ice with his gloves and saw deep claw marks in the wood, old marks layered over older ones. Some were small, some larger, all reaching upward, as if something once wanted out or someone once wanted in. Isaiah's throat tightened. Easy, he whispered. Ghost stopped scratching and pressed his nose to the crack. A sound came. From inside. Not a voice. Not movement. Just the faint hollow creak of the house shifting in the cold. Isaiah tested the latch. It opened with a groan that seemed too loud for the empty woods. The cellar smelled of damp boards, dust, and metal. He turned on his flashlight. The beam cut across shelves lined with cracked jars, old paint cans, folded tarps, and a workbench covered in a thin fur of frost. Ghost entered first, his body low, ears forward, tail still. He moved past everything ordinary and went straight to the far wall, where a faded rug hung from 2 nails. Isaiah pulled it aside. Behind it, the The wood paneling did not match. One board was newer. He pressed his fingers along the edge and felt a narrow groove. With a slow pull, the panel gave way, revealing a shallow space in the wall. Inside sat a metal box wrapped in oilcloth. Isaiah set it on the workbench and opened it carefully. There were dog tags, several of them, dulled by age. There were yellowed forms with official seals, photographs with faces blurred by moisture, and a small cassette recorder in a plastic bag. On top lay a leather collar, cracked and stiff, with a brass plate that read Snow. Ghost stepped closer. For the first time since Isaiah had known him, the dog lowered his head and trembled so hard the tags on his current harness gave a soft, aching chime. Isaiah picked up the collar, and Ghost pressed his nose to it, eyes closing. Snow, not Ghost. Snow had been his first name. Isaiah felt the room tilt gently beneath him. He remembered Nathan Briggs holding a white puppy no bigger than a duffel bag, laughing as the little dog chewed the end of his glove. I am calling him Snow, Nathan had said, because he will show up quiet, cover everything, and make the world honest. Isaiah had forgotten that. Or maybe he had buried it where grief could not reach. He placed the collar down and lifted the cassette recorder. The batteries were old, but when he pressed play, the machine gave a weak click, then a hiss. A man's voice emerged through the static, thin but unmistakable. Nathan Briggs. If this is found, my name is Corporal Nathan Briggs, United States Marine Corps. I do not have much time to explain. The children are not lost. The paperwork is false. Someone in Pine Harbor is moving them through private placements, hiding them under new names, and using the storm roads to keep questions away. Isaiah stopped breathing. Ghost stood frozen beside him, listening. The tape crackled, then Nathan spoke again, softer now, as if leaning close to the recorder. Cole, if you ever hear this, trust the dog. Snow knows the scent trail. He knows the girl's bloodline. Her mother was the first child I got out. I thought I saved her. I was wrong. If her little girl comes back here, it means they found her too. The tape hissed. A long pause followed. Then Nathan's voice, worn with exhaustion but steady as a prayer. Do not bring the sheriff. And do not let the white dog leave the child. The recorder clicked off. The cellar returned to silence. Isaiah stood over the box, the flashlight trembling in his hand, while Ghost turned toward the stairs and stared up into the house above them. Somewhere beyond the boards, the wind moved through broken windows with a soft, almost human sigh. Isaiah looked at the dog, at the old collar, at the hidden names in the box, and understood that the child in the hospital had not wandered into a storm. She had been following a promise made before she was born. Isaiah led Ghost back to the truck, each step careful against the uneven snow and hidden ice patches, the weight of the discovery pressing on him like a physical force. The cabin behind them seemed to shrink in the gray light of late morning, its secrets now partially exposed, but still holding their breath for the right eyes to understand. Ghost moved with a deliberate gait, sniffing the air, nose close to the ground, body tense yet fluid, guiding Isaiah as if he could read the path through the forest, each step an unspoken command. The truck roared to life beneath Isaiah's hands, tires spinning softly in the snow, and the headlights cut through the dense line of pines as they followed the narrow track northward, toward the next hint of the story hidden by winter. Every mile brought the chill deeper into Isaiah's bones, but also a sense of purpose that warmed him from inside. Ghost's gaze remained fixed on the horizon beyond the trees, ears swiveling, muscles coiled in anticipation, and Isaiah could feel the quiet intelligence directing the dog, a partner attuned to invisible signals left in the snow and wind. As they approached the bend in the road that overlooked the frozen river valley, Isaiah saw the first signs of tracks that did not belong to the girl or to the dog. Faint impressions of boots in the thin layer of fresh powder, leading from the tree-line toward an old bridge long disused, wooden planks weathered and slick with ice. He parked and climbed out, Ghost immediately following, paws crunching over the crusted snow, breath visible in short white bursts. Isaiah squatted beside the tracks, noting their depth, direction, and spacing, then looked down at Ghost, who crouched slightly, nose to the ground, tail low, eyes intent. Show me, Isaiah murmured, and the dog lifted his head, amber eyes meeting Isaiah's, as if confirming that he understood the unspoken request. Together, they followed the tracks, winding through the sparse undergrowth, snow brushing Isaiah's coat with every movement until they reached the bridge. Its boards groaned faintly beneath their weight, and Isaiah paused, listening to the hollow sound, the faint echo that seemed to answer back from the forest. Ghost stepped onto the bridge first, body low, scanning the surroundings with precision, then backtracked to ensure Isaiah followed safely. On the far side, the trail led toward a cluster of abandoned cabins, roofs caving under the snow, windows shattered or missing, and Isaiah's heart quickened. He remembered Nathan Briggs' voice from the tape, the words about hidden children and private placements, and realized that they had arrived at the place the message had intended them to find. Ghost's nose pressed to a snowdrift near one of the cabins, tail stiff, and he let out a low whine that reverberated in the quiet morning air. Isaiah approached, kneeling beside the dog, and saw a small bundle tucked beneath a partially collapsed porch. A child, eyes closed, wrapped in thin layers of clothing, shivering slightly but alive. Isaiah's breath caught, and Ghost lowered his head, pressing against the bundle, warmth radiating from his body into the girl, guarding her like a sentinel who had been waiting for this moment. Isaiah gently lifted the girl, wrapping her in his parka, and she stirred slightly, a weak sigh escaping as she sensed safety. Ghost moved alongside him, guiding every step back toward the truck, scanning, alert, and ready to respond to any disturbance, the forest quiet except for their careful passage. Isaiah's mind raced through possibilities, planning the route to the hospital, thinking of the photograph, the tape, the collar, and the story that had yet to be completed. The girl in his arms was small and fragile, but her presence, combined with Ghost's silent guidance, filled Isaiah with a quiet determination to see this through. As they reached the truck, Ghost pressed a reassuring body against Isaiah's leg, and Isaiah looked down, meeting the dog's steady gaze, a connection forged over miles of snow and mystery. Together, they loaded the girl into the back, Ghost leaping beside her, standing guard as Isaiah climbed into the driver's seat. Engines hummed, tires gripped snow, and the forest seemed to watch them move away, carrying with them the next chapter in a story that had waited for the right hands and paws to uncover, a journey toward hidden truths, patience, and the quiet miracles that only those who pay attention can witness. The truck descended Black Pine Road with the heater roaring and the windshield slowly clearing, but Isaiah could still feel the forest behind him as if the trees had followed them down the mountain. In the back seat, Ghost stood over the second child with his body angled like a living shield, careful not to press too hard, close enough to lend warmth, steady enough to make every bump in the road feel less frightening. The little girl was younger than the child at the hospital, maybe 5 years old, with dark curls damp against her forehead and a mitten missing from one hand. Isaiah had wrapped her in his parka, then in the emergency blanket from his roadside kit, the silver foil catching the pale winter light like a small piece of dawn. She did not speak. She only opened her eyes once, looked at Ghost, and closed them again as if the white dog was the only proof she needed that the world had not completely forgotten her. Isaiah kept one hand on the wheel and one thumb ready near his phone, but the signal faded in and out between the ridges. When the hospital finally came into view, he saw 2 vehicles near the emergency entrance that had not been there before. One was a county cruiser. The other was a dark sport utility vehicle with tinted windows, parked too close to the doors, engine running, exhaust drifting into the cold air. Ghost saw it too. His ears flattened. A low warning rose from his chest, deep and controlled, the kind of sound that did not ask for attention but earned it. Isaiah slowed before turning into the lot. Through the glass doors, he could see movement inside. Nurses shifting quickly. A security guard standing uncertainly near the hallway. A man in a tan sheriff's jacket speaking with a doctor, his smile polite, his posture too relaxed for a morning like this. Isaiah parked near the ambulance bay instead of the front entrance. He turned around and looked at Ghost. "Stay with her until I open the door." Ghost blinked once, steady as a vow. Isaiah stepped out into the cold and carried the second child through the side entrance, Ghost at his heel, close enough that anyone watching would understand there was no space between them to enter. The hospital smelled of disinfectant, wet boots, and coffee gone bitter in paper cups. Voices softened when Isaiah walked in. The nurse from earlier, Marlene, hurried toward him, and her face changed when she saw the child in his arms. "Another one?" she whispered. Isaiah nodded. "Found near the old cabins. She needs warmth. And I need the first girl moved somewhere secure." Marlene's eyes flicked toward the main corridor, then back to him. "Someone is already asking for her." Isaiah did not ask who. He knew before she said it. The sheriff appeared at the end of the hall, hat in hand, face arranged into concern. He was in his late 50s, broad through the shoulders, with silver hair and a voice that carried years of being obeyed. "Staff Sergeant Cole," he called as if they were old friends. "I heard you have been doing quite a bit of wandering in my county." Isaiah shifted the child gently into Marlene's arms. Ghost stepped between them and the sheriff, not lunging, not barking, simply placing his white body where truth needed a door. The sheriff stopped. His eyes dropped to the dog, and something passed through them so quickly most men would have missed it. Recognition. Not surprise. Recognition. Isaiah felt the final piece settle. "You know him," Isaiah said. The sheriff smiled, but the warmth had gone out of it. "A lot of dogs look alike after enough years." Ghost growled once. Not loud, just enough. From the room behind them came a small voice, thin as a match flame. The first child was awake. Marlene turned sharply. Isaiah moved toward the room, but Ghost reached it first, pushing through the half-open door and standing beside the bed. The little girl's eyes were open, unfocused at first, then suddenly clear when they found the dog. Her lips trembled. "Snow," she whispered. Isaiah stopped in the doorway. The sheriff went still behind him. The name moved through the room like light finding a crack under a locked door. Snow. The name on the old collar. The name Nathan Briggs had given a white puppy before the world tried to bury both of them in silence. The child lifted one weak hand and touched Ghost's fur. Ghost lowered his head with a gentleness that made the nurse cover her mouth. Isaiah knelt beside the bed. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" The girl swallowed. Her voice barely carried over the hum of the heater. "Lily." Isaiah felt the name land with weight and tenderness. "Lily what?" She looked past him toward the hall, fear gathering in her eyes, but Ghost pressed his head closer, and her fingers tightened in his fur. "Lily Briggs," she whispered. The room became very quiet. Isaiah looked down at the burned photograph in his hand, then at the sheriff, then back to the child who carried Nathan's name like a candle through a storm. Lily took a trembling breath. "Mama said if the snow got bad, follow the white dog. She said he would remember us." Isaiah's throat tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Where is your mother, Lily?" Her eyes filled with tears, but the answer came clear enough to change everything. "She want to get the box." The man with the badge told her to stop asking. The sheriff's face hardened, only for a second, but Isaiah saw it. So did Ghost. At that exact moment, the white K9 stepped away from the bed and stood in the doorway, placing himself between Lily and the hall, between the children and every old lie that had walked into that hospital wearing authority. Isaiah rose slowly, the tape recorder in his coat pocket feeling heavier than steel. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Marlene, call the state police. Not the county. Tell them we have 2 children, federal evidence, and a recorded statement from Corporal Nathan Briggs." The sheriff took one step forward. Ghost's growl stopped him cold. Isaiah looked at him with the stillness of a Marine who had finally reached the truth after walking through 8 years of snow. "You do not get to bury them twice." Outside, the clouds broke for the first time all morning, and a narrow blade of sunlight fell across the hospital floor, touching Ghost's white fur until he seemed less like a dog and more like the answer to a prayer no one had dared speak aloud. The winter sun had climbed higher, cutting through the drifting clouds in pale shafts that turned the hospital parking lot into a field of glittering frost. Isaiah Cole walked slowly toward the entrance, each step deliberate, carrying the weight of discovery and responsibility, while Ghost padded silently beside him, white coat glinting in the light, eyes amber and unflinching, a living beacon of vigilance. Inside, the children were settled into quiet warmth, blankets tucked snugly around them, their small breaths rising in gentle rhythm against the hum of machines and heaters. Isaiah knelt between the 2 beds, carefully examining each child, feeling the fragile pulse of life that had traveled through the storm, the forest, and the hidden passages of Black Pine Road. Ghost moved with calm authority along the room, shifting occasionally to place a paw lightly near a blanket or a shoulder, ensuring the children remained safe in the way only a guardian who understood instinct and devotion could provide. Isaiah unfolded the burned photograph and the plastic sleeve containing the dog tags, holding them up to the light. He traced the faded letters with a finger, reading each name, each marker of time, each silent testimony of those who had come before. The words, "Tell Cole the snow remembers," felt heavier than the cold outside, and yet in the warmth of the hospital room, they became a guide, a reminder that promises, once made, could endure across years and storms. He placed the photograph beside him and turned to Ghost, who had lowered himself near Lily, resting his chin on the edge of her blanket. Isaiah's hand brushed the white fur, and he felt a connection that stretched beyond memory or training, a bridge between past and present, between lost lives and lives found again. Outside, snow still clung to the eaves, melting slowly in the sunlight, each drop catching light like a tiny prism. Isaiah looked at the sheriff standing quietly in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room, and he knew that authority alone could not have brought them this far. Only persistence, trust, and the quiet courage of a dog and a Marine had made it possible. Ghost lifted his head, ears alert, and the two children stirred slightly, recognizing the presence of the protector who had followed them through shadow, wind, and snow. Isaiah whispered softly to the children, careful not to break the fragile peace. "You are safe now. The storm has passed, and you are here." Ghost shifted slightly, pressing a paw lightly against the mattress, a silent reassurance, as if acknowledging that the journey was far from over, but the immediate danger had passed. Isaiah rose and moved to the window, looking out at the forest beyond, where black pine and spruce created a stark line against the pale sky. He imagined the paths they had followed, the hidden truths uncovered, and the unspoken promise that this morning held for every child and every memory left behind. The children's breathing grew even, small hands curled in warmth, and Ghost remained at their side, unwavering, amber eyes bright with purpose. Isaiah knelt once more, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face, feeling the heat returning to her skin, and he let himself imagine the next steps, reporting, documenting, ensuring that the boxes, the names, the dog tags, and the truths they contained would finally reach the right hands. Ghost placed his head against Isaiah's knee, a subtle affirmation that the bond they shared had completed a circle begun long ago in another winter, in another place, under another set of unkind circumstances. Isaiah breathed deeply, feeling the tension ease slightly, the sun cutting warmth through the room, light landing on the children, on Ghost, on the photograph, and on the evidence of a promise kept. The sound of distant traffic, the faint hiss of a radiator, and the soft exhale of the children filled the space, and Isaiah understood that some stories did not end with a single action, but with a sequence of quiet moments, of vigilance, of patience, and of loyalty. Ghost stood slowly, moving to the foot of the beds, and Isaiah followed with his eyes, recognizing that the dog's presence had not only guided them through snow and forest, but had also provided the steady heartbeat that kept hope alive. Isaiah picked up the cassette recorder, still holding Nathan Briggs' voice in fragile tin and tape, and placed it carefully beside the children, a relic of trust and duty, a witness to all that had been endured. Outside, the sunlight reflected off the ice and snow, scattering bright across the parking lot, and Isaiah felt a calm certainty. The children were safe, the hidden truths were known, and the bond between a Marine and his K-9 had carried more than just survival. It had carried redemption, guidance, and the quiet miracle of finding what was lost. Ghost lay at the foot of the beds, body warm, breathing steady, eyes bright, and Isaiah, standing beside him, allowed a rare, slow exhale, feeling the depth of their shared victory, the simplicity of it, and the profound grace that had brought them to this moment.